What is going on, my fellow navigators, and welcome back to another video. Today's discussion is going to be all around whether you should have your Pokemon cards regraded or not. Now, I get this question pretty often from members of the community. You know, they get their cards graded with Beckett or PSA, and maybe it's not the grade that they had expected. Maybe it was a little bit lower than what they had anticipated, and they want to try to go for that higher grade, but they're not sure if it's worth it or if they can actually achieve that higher grade. And so today what I want to do is just kind of give you my breakdown on how I determine if maybe there's a card that I have that I think can achieve a higher grade, and if I, certain characteristics that I look at to determine if it has a viable chance of coming back a higher grade. And then we're also going to discuss the differences between having a card regraded, having a card reviewed, as well as having a card cross-graded. But before we get rolling on today's discussion, guys, a couple announcements that I want to make sure that you guys hear. The first one is, if you haven't found out already, we have hit the 1,000 subscriber milestone here on the channel. And as a big thank you to you guys, I am giving away some Pokemon card products. Now, the way that you can enter into that, first of all, go to the 1,000 subscriber special video that was posted on Sunday. I will put that as a link up here in the eye. Go to that video. You need to like that particular video. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. And then also in the comment section on that particular video, go ahead and comment your most impactful or the biggest positive impact that Pokemon has made on your life. That will enter you into the giveaway, and you guys will have a chance at winning those Pokemon card products. The deadline is going to be Wednesday, September 23rd by 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you guys still have plenty of time to go ahead and enter that. And then the winner will be announced in Thursday's video. So that will be on September 24th. What I'm going to do is just use a random comment generator. And we're going to go ahead and choose who the winner is on Thursday's video. So be looking out for that, guys. Go over to that video. Make sure that you guys enter yourselves in. There's some pretty cool products, some unique products. They mean something to me, and hopefully they will mean something to whoever wins that contest. The next little announcement, and you guys can already tell, is we have started on the studio. So we've just got started with everything. We're just in basically the foundational level of kind of getting things squared away in here. But I think it definitely looks a little bit better. The theme that I'm going for with the studio, the logo of the channel is navigating the world of Pokemon one video at a time. So I would like to have more of like a travel navigational type of theme in here. So as you can see from some of the pictures up here on the wall, eventually I would like to get posters of all of the different regions within the Pokemon world, different cities, different landmarks, things like that, to really go with that navigational theme and really make the navigation station a cool place to be and a fun place to come back to. So that's what we've got started on here, just in the foundational steps. So be on the lookout. Things will only get better with the studio moving on into the future. So with that all being said, guys, let's go ahead and jump into today's discussion on whether you should have your Pokemon cards regraded or not. So the first thing we'll start with is the actual regrade. If you get a card back, and most of the time when I'm getting this question, it's for those of you who have gotten your cards graded through BGS or Beckett grading service. And the reason being is that with Beckett, they do give you those 4 subgrades. So you can, really look at it visually and say to yourself, man, if I was maybe just a half a grade higher, I would have been able to get that higher grade. But I do get questions about it with PSA as well. Those of you who maybe got a 9 and you really thought that it was going to come back a 10. Either way, these are some of the things that you can look for in the card, and also some of the things to be aware of before you actually have your card regraded, and some of the steps that you can take when you're having that card regraded. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll jump over here to the screen, and I've got 3 examples up here. So you've got a BGS 10, 9.5, and a 9 Charizard. So let's say, for instance, you get your card back and it is a BGS 9, but you were really thinking this would come back a 9.5. Well, the way that I determine whether I'm going to have this card regraded again is I start to take a look at the 4 characteristics here. So I look at the centering, the corners, the edges, and the surface, and I see what those particular grades came back in. Now, for this particular card, in order for this to be bumped up to a 9.5, realistically, you're going to have the edges at least come back a 9.5 in the regrade, and the centering is going to need to come back a 9 as well. So pretty much to get a solid 9.5, you'll need 3 9.5s out of the 4, and then the 4th one would need to be a 9 in order to come back that 9.5. So realistically, we would need a half grade here in centering, and we would need a half grade here in edges. So you have to look at it and you have to say to yourself, okay, what is the price differential of going from a 9 to a 9.5? Because a couple things that you have to take into consideration if you're having your card regraded is realistically you have to break open the packaging. So the case itself, you're going to need to break that open and send it in once again to BGS to have it regraded. Now, there's some cons in that, obviously. There's the potential that when you break the case open, you might damage the card. There's the potential that in the shipping process, the card could be damaged as well. So, you know, having it regraded doesn't always mean that it will, at the very least, come back the same grade that you initially got. So you may run the risk of your card, you know, in this case, maybe coming back in 8.5 instead of a 9. So these are all things that you have to consider if you're looking to have that card regraded. Same thing here if we look at the BGS 9.5 Charizard. Now for BGS, what I have found is that they are most strict on the centering. Very, very particular about centering with BGS. So the fact that this card did come back a 10 in centering is really good news, because it's very difficult in my experience to try to get a 10 in centering with Beckett. But as you can see here, the edges got a 9.5, surface got a 9.5, and then the corners here got a 9. Now, if we bounce over to the 10, you can see in order to get that BGS 10, that pristine 10, you're going to need at least 3 out of 4 10s in those different categories, and then the 4th would have to be a 9.5. So realistically, for this to be bumped up to a 10, we would need a half a grade in edges, a half a grade in surface, and a half a grade in corners. You know, 3 out of the 4 characteristics would have to be bumped up by at least 0.5 to get up to that pristine 10. So again, you want to weigh all of the potential downfalls of, you know, having your card regraded, because you're going to need to break that packaging open. You're going to have to send the card back in. There is always the potential that even if the card isn't damaged, I mean, these are human beings that are actually grading these cards. You know, it's not just a computer that they stick the cards into and it pops out, you know, an algorithm and says, okay, here's the overall grade. These are actually human beings that are going through and are looking at these cards. And I mean, it is supposed to be an objective matter, but there's going to be some human error in there, where even if you got the exact same grader both times, there's no guarantee that your card will come back in the same grade. And ultimately, the hope for you is, if you're having your card regraded, that it's going to come back a higher grade, but there is that potential that it will come back lower. So it's something that you definitely have to take into consideration here, risk that you have to be willing to take in order to send that card in, along with the additional costs of doing so. So to have the card regraded, you're going to go through the same process again with BGS and with PSA. If you're looking to try to sell one of these cards relatively quickly, you guys know how abysmal the turnaround times are right now with BGS and PSA. So that is another thing to take into consideration, is the time value of money and how long that it's going to take for you guys to get this card back and get it back out on the open market, if you can even get it out in a higher grade in the end anyways. So all things to consider there, guys, but that is what you would look at if you were going to have a card regraded. Now there is another avenue that you can take that is a little bit safer than the one that we've just discussed, and that is having your card reviewed. Now, to have your card reviewed, all you're really going to do is you're going to take the card, which is still in the protective casing, and you're just going to send it back in to whatever grading service you had grade that particular card. So for instance, if it was BGS, you're just going to send that entire graded card back into them, and basically when they get it back in, they'll see, okay, this was graded by us. Obviously they're looking for a review. Now this can be difficult in the sense that they are now trying to grade this card through the protective casing, so they can't really get as good of a look. And to be honest with you, I would say 99% of the time, the card is going to come back in the exact same grade that you initially got. Because if you guys think about it, you know, these are supposed to be professionals at what they're doing. So basically, if you send this card back in and are saying, hey, you know, I don't think that your professional and objective opinion is correct, chances are they're not going to go back on their initial grading. Because if you look on BGS or PSA's website, they have a very thorough breakdown of exactly how they go about grading cards and the standards that they hold themselves to. So to go back on that, I would just say it, you know, 9 times out of 10 at the very least, the card is not going to come back. But there have been instances, I have seen and witnessed instances where the card does come back a higher grade, but they are few and far between. But it is also safer to go this route, having your card reviewed rather than having it regraded, because you're not breaking open the casing, you're not running the risk of the card being damaged, either in breaking open the case or having it shipped. So it is a safer option, but having it regraded, you're basically allowing the grader to look at it through a fresh lens, so to speak. There's no kind of preconceived notion as to, okay, this is the grade it received, we're going to stick with that. They're essentially looking at a brand new card in their eyes. Now, the one thing that I will say about this is if you do break the case open and you do have your card regraded, you do go down that route, be sure to send the case back in to whoever your grading service is, whether it's BGS, whether it's PSA, and that way, guys, they can maintain an accurate population report on the card. So if your card gets a 9, you send it back in and it does happen to, let's say, get a 9.5 through BGS, send that 9 grading case back into them so they can update the population report, and when you get that 9.5 back, you'll be happy and they'll be happy as well. So that's another thing that I ask you guys to do. It definitely helps out everybody in the community. And then the last big topic of having cards regraded is what is known as cross-grading. And cross-grading is basically where you take a graded card with one company, so we'll say Beckett, and you actually send it back in to be graded by another company, we'll say in this instance PSA. And you actually see this quite often. It goes really both ways. Let's say that you get a BGS 9 or 9.5 on your card. There's actually a pretty good chance that that card could come back a PSA 10. And in my opinion, PSA has a little more leniency with cards when they're being graded than with Beckett. I feel like Beckett is definitely more strict, especially when it comes to centering. This is what I found in my experience. So very often collectors or investors, if they get a 9 or a 9.5, they want to try to go for that PSA 10. And it makes sense. I mean, from a Beckett 9 or 9.5 to a PSA 10, there is a pretty big increase in price for most cards. So it only makes sense that, especially if you're an investor and you're wanting to try to sell, try to get a little bit higher price on your overall sell price, does make sense to go ahead and go, or at least try to go with that PSA 10. Again, you have a couple options with this. You can go ahead and crack the case open. Let's say you got a BGS card. You can crack the case open and you can send the raw card into PSA to have graded, or you can actually keep it in the case and send it into PSA. And if they see that the grade is in fact higher than what they would necessarily agree with BGS, then they will actually put it in their own protective casing and take it out of the packaging themselves. So then the onus of the card being damaged is essentially on them rather than you. So you do have a couple options here. And as far as determining whether you should have a card cross-graded, again, you're going to want to look at the price differential from, let's say, a BGS 9, 9.5 to a PSA 10. If it is a significant increase and you're willing to take the risk of breaking open the case, then I would say definitely go for it. And especially if you look at those 4 characteristics on your BGS card. So let's say, for instance, we'll take this for example again. We've got the BGS 9.5 Charizard here. You see that, for the most part, this card is in really, really good condition. The corners in this case got a 9, but we've got 9.5s on edges and surface. As I said, BGS is always, in my experience, much more difficult to get on centering in a 10. So I would say, this particular card right here, this would be a good candidate to actually consider maybe going for that PSA 10. Maybe if you got, for instance, this BGS 9, where, centering's an 8.5, edges are a 9, it may be more difficult in that case for that card to come back a PSA 10. I would think that honestly, when you send this card in, it's probably going to come back a PSA 9 as well. So realistically, you have to look at these characteristics. And again, like I said, it's typically with cross grading, you are seeing cards that are coming back in a BGS 9, 9.5, and people want to get that PSA 10. Now, there is also the holy grail. And beyond PSA 10s, there is a black label BGS 10. So this is an absolute perfect card. So it is 10s across the board. Now, this card is also extremely difficult to get. And I mean, the reason being is that it's essentially a perfect card. There is absolutely no defects on it whatsoever. Whereas even with a PSA 10 or even a BGS pristine 10, there can still be some defects, as you've seen, like in the case of this Charizard here, centering's still not perfect. Came back in 9.5. PSA, it's not necessarily a perfect card, but a black label 10 BGS card, that is essentially a perfect card. So very often what I'll see and the questions that I'll have is I'll have people who have a PSA 10 card and they want to try to go for a BGS black label. And the thing that I always look at in this case is, first of all, I want to see how many or if any BGS black labels there are out on the market for that particular card. And what I have found is even if there's a couple, even if there's like maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 BGS black labels out, which that's pretty rare to actually even get to that threshold, chances are really good that that card is not going to come back in that black label, because BGS really, I mean, they really try to save that particular tier for the absolute best cards. And they want it to be a very, very small number because they want to hold themselves to that extremely high standard. So this one is really tough to say, in my opinion, as to whether you should go that route. Let's say that you've got a BGS 10, you think it could go for the black label, or you've got a PSA 10, you think it could go for that black label. This one's really tough, guys. And in the end, this one's going to be entirely up to you. Again, I would say you have to really look at those 4 characteristics on the card. You have to see how strong those 4 scores were, and then you kind of make the decision yourself. Again, you're running the risk if you're having the card regraded and you're breaking open the protective casing. You're running the risk that it will come back even lower than your BGS 10 or PSA 10. And then obviously, you know, if you're sending your card in as a BGS 10 to Beckett in its pristine form, chances are it is not going to come back in that black label. So just all things to consider there, guys. Like I said before, these are some questions that I get pretty frequently, and hopefully the discussion that we've had here today has helped you all out in trying to determine whether you should have your cards regraded, whether you should have them reviewed, or whether you should have them cross-graded. So that is going to do it for today, guys. Thank you again for coming back each and every week. I appreciate your support more than you can imagine. Other than that, guys, I will see you all next time. My name is PokeNav. I'm here to help you navigate the world of Pokemon one video at a time, and I will see you all in the next video.